somehow get that out, but Lord willing, we'll keep that schedule as it is. So please help yourself and get those around. Anyhow, if you weren't here last week, what we're about to do is, not about to do, what we're going to do is Bill wrote a lot of articles for us in the Grapevine, which they compiled and put them in this book called The Language of the Heart. And there's a lot of good stuff about a lot of different things in there. Mostly what we'll focus on is the articles on the traditions. Now and then, some of the articles that he writes, there's something that, a key word, like tonight we've got a couple ideas. We have what's called a group conscience tonight. We have leadership. There's a lot of different ideas in one tradition, and we try to pull the articles that are a reference to that. So, but most of them deal directly with the traditions themselves. We found Bill wrote this, and we always like to start with that, and it's titled The Language of the Heart, and he goes as this: why at this particular point in history has God chosen to communicate his healing grace to so many of us? Every aspect of this global unfoldment can be related to a single crucial word. The word is communication. There has been life-saving communication among ourselves, with the world around us, and with God. From the beginning, communication in AA has been no ordinary transmission of helpful ideas and attitudes. Because of our kinship in suffering and because of our common means of deliverance, are effective for ourselves only when constantly carried to others. Our channels of contact have always been charged with the language of the heart. So we like to always start with that, and he does such a good job of getting his point across. We read a couple things last week, kind of tongue-in-cheek, and what we like to do is try to keep this as light and as interesting as we can, because sometimes it could be a little bit dry for some. Anyhow, I found this one thing, a description of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you can see we got a couple of things up here, the 3 pertinent ideas, and it is not how it works. This is something that we coined for the traditions, and we're going to talk about an AA group versus a group of AAs, and we will find out tonight that Alcoholics Anonymous indeed is all 3 of these things: anarchy, dictatorship, and a democracy. And you say that's impossible, but it's not. Only in Alcoholics Anonymous can that be. These things were the key idea of last week, Tradition 1, and we stated that Bill starts off backwards of the steps. He starts off with the solution in the traditions, not the problem like he did in the steps, and it was obviously unity. And we found out last week there's different types of unity: powerful unity, substantial unity, essential unity, permanent unity, and lo and behold, tonight he adds to the recipe of unity. And if you weren't here last week, we'll go ahead and HBO help a brother out. I'm going to go ahead and put those page numbers on where they were. It's important that we have that, because it just jumped off this year about this unity thing, because from this stems all the rest of what we're doing and not doing. So, if you weren't here, that was page 21. Page, let me see, substantial was 77. Essential was, oh man, that's a bad 7, isn't it? Don't get old, was 70. And permanent was 70. Can you imagine having that? Powerful, powerful, powerful. If you've been around, you've heard that till you're about sick. Substantial, essential, and permanent. Those are all different. Those are the 4 corners of the world, if you will. And wait till you see what tonight is. It's absolutely fascinating. By the way, Justin came up last week after that. He said 16 AF. I said, what? He said 16 AF. I said, what are you talking about? He even put it on the board. And I said, okay, all right. I give up. I wouldn't have been able to sleep that night. He said, you said absolutely fascinating 16 times. So, yeah, sorry, I wasn't aware of that. It just comes out because it is. So, anyhow, absolutely fascinating on that. Anyhow, that's what we talked about as far as unity, and it's so crucial. I'd like to start with this one thing that we like to read, kind of tongue-in-cheek, about Alcoholics Anonymous, and it goes as follows. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship designed and administered by a bunch of ex-drunks whose only qualification for membership is they cannot hold their liquor and do not want to learn to do so. It has no rules, dues, or fees, no nothing that any sensible organization seems to require. At meetings, the speakers start on one subject and end up talking about something entirely different, concluding by saying, I really don't know anything about the program except that it works. The groups always seem to be broke but seem to have money, and they are always losing members, yet they seem to grow. They claim AA is a selfish program, yet always seem to be doing things for others. Every group passes rules, laws, edicts, pronouncements that everybody blitheringly ignores. Members who disagree with anything are privileged to walk out in a huff, quitting forever, only to return as though nothing happened and be greeted accordingly. Nothing is ever planned more than 24 hours ahead, yet great projects are born and survive magnificently. Nothing in AA is according to Hoyle. How can it survive? Perhaps it's because we've learned to laugh at ourselves. God made man, and he made laughter too. Perhaps he's pleased with our efforts to make everything right, no matter who pushes the wrong button. Maybe he's pleased not with our perfection, but with our sincerity. Maybe he's pleased because we're trying to be nobody but ourselves. We don't know how it works, and members keep receiving their dividend checks from their AA investment. It's smart to stay sober. A lot of fun, but a lot of serious in there. And then talking about money, we got two things. Cheryl has brought books, and then Tony last week was the substitute chairperson. If you got a book last week and we're making time payments, who's doing the book money? Are you doing the book money, or Cheryl's taking over? If you got a book last week and we're making time payments or whatever, please see this beautiful young lady right here, Cheryl, who's going to take care of that. She's also got books in the back for purchase, hardback, softback, so on and so forth. So that's one item in need. Obviously, we need to pay our things, and she brought pamphlets and so on and so forth, so we could do that. And then also, seventh tradition, we will be honoring that. We are self-supporting through our own contributions because the church needs the keep the lights on for us, and the water, and the supplies for the coffee, and so on and so forth. So we will go ahead and do that as well as that's going around. So, what are the three pertinent ideas of the traditions? Well, we got one of them last week. It was unity. The second pertinent idea would be primary purpose. And the last one was one that we kind of don't like, and it's that R word, responsibility. Like the steps, these traditions are interwoven, and you will find one or all three of these pertinent ideas in every one of the traditions. And I'm going to drop an AF. Absolutely fascinating when you look at it that way. It really is. The three pertinent ideas are of these traditions. So, what we're saying, obviously, Bill said the purpose of these traditions is to retain the grace of God. And he said the fundamentals of our unity and all of AA's progress can be reckoned in two words: humility and responsibility. By the way, if you weren't here last week, how we established the unity were these two things: humility and sacrifice. Thank you. With that being said, the traditions are not separate from one another, but they're tightly woven into a protective mantle That protective mantle, guess what? Protects ourselves from ourselves. If AA is going to falter, it will be within. Our biggest wounds are self-inflicted. And Bill also coined Alcoholics Anonymous, children of chaos. Very interesting. We said this last week. Obviously, we're a communion of sinners, not of saints, and we are brothers not so much in virtue but in defects. They're traditions, and we'll find out tonight they are not rules, laws, or punishments. They are spiritual principles for the survival of AA. Like the 12 steps, the 12 traditions aren't to be argued or debated. They are to be followed. And we talked about that last week, that these traditions are experience or history. It happened. It's not debatable. It's not a philosophy. It's not a theory. It's our experience. And that's what is so important about these traditions. So simply, obviously, Bill wrote these to keep AA healthy and alive. The 12 steps, obviously, we talked about the action for the individual that produces a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience. The 12 traditions are the non-action, not only for the individual, but for the groups. And last week, if you weren't here too, running out of board spaces, what we found out what these really are about were what? It was the R word, not that one. It was for relations. Remember the 3 levels of relations that he talked about? And we established too that I cannot have a relationship with you if I don't have one with me. I can't have one with me if I don't have one with God. Therefore, if I can't have that with you, then I can't have it with a group, and the group can't have it with AA. And he talks about the whole levels, and AA can't have a relationship with the world. That's the level of relations. And it all begins inside, not out. These traditions aren't for the outside in, it's from inside out. They begin at home. Okay, so it goes on to say, obviously, since they're not rules, regulations, and laws, we obey them willingly. First of all, because we ought to, then because we want to, and most importantly, we find out if we don't, we will fade off the scene. The power of the traditions lie in the fact that these life-giving spiritual principles spring out of experience and are rooted in love. That's why we don't use these to beat people up, and we don't use them as a club, and we don't use them to run people out and have debates and arguments and fist fights and all that, because they're rooted in love. People died so we could have these. How dare I would pick up love and use it as a weapon on somebody. The traditions are a guide to better ways of working and living, and obviously they ensure survival and harmony, not only to the individual, but for the group. Bill said, obviously, we needed to have a design of construction for survival, and he said, AA is no success story in the ordinary sense of the word. It's a story of suffering transmuted under the grace into spiritual progress. The 12 traditions work not because we're better people, but because we are weaker people. Personal experience for myself with the traditions, I found it's easier to learn and teach and take in these traditions when I embrace them rather than try to enforce them. Because if I embrace them, guess what? I won't need to enforce them. In other words, I'm not the guardian of these traditions or custodian, so I lay down the weapons and pick up the broom and the coffee pot, and we used to have ashtrays, the old ABCs of the fellowship. Ashtrays, brooms, chairs, coffee, and so on and so forth. So obviously, when we found out, we learned more from our mistakes than our success, and simply stated the will of God for the individual alcoholic would be the 12 steps. The will of the group would be the 12 traditions. So important about these 12 traditions is they preserve the past, thank God. Because I can't know where I'm at unless I know where I've been. I can't know where I'm going unless I know where I'm at. So they preserve the past. They help me understand the present. and also it helps us discuss and predict our own future. And the 12 traditions help us remember our past mistakes, to avoid future ones, and not to make them all over again. And obviously, we talk about this, we will tonight, about the three types. It's a anarchy, a dictatorship, and obviously, democracy. We obey because we want to, or ought to, want to, then certainly we have to. Most importantly, these were forged in the school of hard experience of thousands of alcoholics. And Bill said, implicit throughout AA's traditions is the confession that we as a fellowship has its sins. We admit that we have character defects as a society and that these defects threaten us continually. So obviously we find out the guy who wrote the preamble was a guy named Tom. He was very helpful to Bill. He wrote the preamble, and he wrote this too in 1949. He calls it AA's 12 Traditions, a pattern of practical experience. And it goes as this: the traditions are the essence of the experience of the groups and the movement. They were written by Bill in an attempt to distill and condense into usable form the knowledge that the groups and individual members have accumulated. The traditions are a pattern of practical experience, a guide that will spare many other headaches. Obviously, Bill said, quote, "We need a statement of principle, some form of code of traditions, a genuine need for some great unifying, overreaching set of truths that could apply to all groups all the time and serve them in growth, just like the steps do for the individual." And it was so well established last night when Bill was talking about the steps and the traditions, he can't do one without the other. And the more that I'm into this, the more I realize they are like this. Can't have one without the other. And obviously, I suppose that's why the triangle. We have the recovery, 12 steps. We have the other side, the 12 traditions, which is our unity. And of course, we have the third side, the 12 concepts for service. Triangle, all three sides are equal, and we know that is the strongest structure in the world. Okay, Bill found out in unity there is strength. Without unity, we are victims. In other words, he wrote these in the 40s when there was supposed to be unity, but actually it was a time of great disunity. Groups were dying, alcoholics were dying, and he knew that the situation needed to be addressed. Simply found out AA stays whole or we die. And last week we established this too. First things will always need to be first. Humility before success. Unity before fame. Bill said, if we maintain humility, and so are our unity, and he reminds us we are people who could not exist at all except for the grace of God. So, tonight's tradition is tradition 2. This is, I sound like it with that other thing that I do, one of my favorite traditions. Why? It's very alcoholic. The short form is longer than the long form, and only in AA could you get away with that. So, remember how last week I started with the short form and said, look at what the long form says and how much more information. Well, I'm eating that tonight. So in this case, look how much more information the short form has than the long form. Here they are. And it's important, please, and if you weren't here last week, we established that the short form was written by Earl Treat, the guy who started AA in Chicago, pared them down with Bill's help to 200 words so they could be read in the meetings, and we made that observation that is probably not done at too many meetings anymore. So whether it's done anything, something, or nothing, that remains to be seen. That's just our history. But I will tell you that it changes everything, usually with the long form versus the short. So anyhow, this is the long form of tradition 2. For our group purpose. Remember I said there's a couple ideas. There's 2 of them right there. Group purpose. That's 2 different ideas. there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God. There's a couple, three ideas right there. As he may express himself in our group conscience. So you can see in that very long short form, if you will, there's about a half a dozen ideas. So this thing is loaded, absolutely loaded. And when I was getting ready to do this, it just blew my head off, and it don't take much because there's not a whole lot left. Now, here is the short form. For our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority. People get nervous with that. A loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants, they do not govern. That's about double of the long form. A whole lot of ideas in that. So, as we established last week too, the 12 traditions are often referred to as why it works. They ensure the continuance of AA as a whole by providing guidelines for groups to evaluate their activities and actions. In a practical vein, they are individually and collectively humility builders for the group. And we found out that really it's a humility is being cut down to the right size with yourself, the right size with your fellow alcoholic, and most importantly, cut down to the right size with God. That other book talks about if you're going to get to heaven, you have to be childlike. That means you don't grow up, you grow down. So we don't grow up in these traditions, in these steps, we grow down. Constant deflation of ego or self. They ask the group to consider its conduct from a broader perspective and when necessary give up something for the overall good of AA. The traditions also contain spiritual principles. These principles, when applied in our lives, complement the steps as a guide to personal recovery. And obviously, taken from the steps and 12 traditions, the spiritual principles and traditions that I try to strive for in my daily life, and this would be number 2. When we come to understand the wisdom of the group's decision and the necessity of patiently awaiting developments, the real and permanent leadership of AA can offer the quiet opinion, the sure knowledge and humble example, resolving a crisis, leading by example rather than driving by a mandate. There's 2 words that explains what that is. That's a group conscience. So, the group conscience, before we go ahead and get into what we're going to read about tonight, has been around since the beginning. One of the first examples was when Bill was going back and forth to Towns Hospital. He had a lot of wet drunks, and Lois was home taking care of them. Charlie Towns wanted to offer Bill a job to be the first professional AA counselor. Now, they were living on potatoes and water, if that. He needed the money. He was all excited. He was going to take the job. He went running home. He went running in the kitchen. Lois was there attending to these wet drunks. They were just really about a minute sober. And Bill came in with his good news. And all 5 of them looked at Bill. He said, "What'd you say?" And he repeated it again. The 5 of them went to the corner and came out and said, "Bill, you're the one that told us that the good is the deadly enemy of the best." That was the first group conscience, and Bill went back to Towns Hospital and said, "Charlie, I got to do this for fun and free. I can't take a penny for that." Had that group conscience not been there, we wouldn't be here tonight because Bill wouldn't have come to Akron. Bill wouldn't have found Dr. Bob and the rest of the story. That was one of the turning points of the group conscience. Another one happened not too far from here at Palisades, 1937. 18 people changed everybody's life and 2 million people. The group conscience that night, they voted 3 things: build a chain of hospitals, have a group of missionaries, and write down their experience because the message was already starting to get garbled. That's what the informed group conscience of that night, a loving God, told them to do. We know the first 2 didn't take off, and the third one bore our program, the fellowship, the book, called Alcoholics Anonymous, the program. So you can see the group experience was long around, long being followed even before Bill wrote these. Yeah, that is an AF. That's absolutely fascinating. What will happen about the group conscience? We're talking about real and permanent leadership. Real and permanent. Not the pie in the sky, not here today, gone tomorrow, and follow me and do this and do that. We're talking real and permanent leadership. Obviously, we need to be aware of, and he talks about it, and we will talk about the difference between a elder statesman and a bleeding deacon. Dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. We find that our leaders are trusted servants. They do not govern. The highest you get in Alcoholics Anonymous is to be a servant. You serve. If you're really blessed, you may become a trusted servant. A lot of people say twisted servant, but I don't know. We'll go with that. So, trusted servant. You don't have to, you get to. And we find out that obviously the bleeding deacon will get in a group or get a group of people and we'll start ordering. Furthermore, we'll do it this way and we'll do it that way and so on and so forth. But the elder statesman always remembers they serve for the good of all without authority over anybody. And that's a joke that that guy, and I know I talk about that other book when he was about ready to be hung on that tree. He said, you ain't got no power. The power you got comes from a higher power than you. You ain't got no power in this room at all. Remember, lack of power was our dilemma. There's one who has all power. That one is God. And that's in every group and everywhere. So Bill said the good is the deadly enemy of the best. Epidemic of that, and what I'm saying is a lot of groups of AAs want to do a lot of things for a lot of different people. And that's a good thing. But it's not Alcoholics Anonymous, number one. And then number two, good is the deadly enemy of the best. And when it comes to Alcoholics Anonymous, nothing but our very best will ever be good enough. I'm going to say that again. Good is the deadly enemy of the best. And only our very best will ever be good enough for Alcoholics Anonymous. And that goes back to, obviously, when you have that, you will have unity. When you have that, you will have primary purpose. And when you have that, it's your and I's responsibility. Remember what we talked about, the three pertinent ideas. It promotes all of that. So the authority, I love that. And, you know, wouldn't you like to have the AA police, where are they when you need them? There's some undercover agents, I guarantee you that. I've seen their badges. Oh, damn it. You know what? You know what I got? Yeah, I said, damn it. You know what? I forgot. I'll bring them. I got a citation book for meetings. Bad behaviors in meetings. I got a citation book. Somebody gave it to me. It's absolutely fast. It is funny. I will give that to you. Not fascinating. It's funny as hell is what it is. So anyhow. But yeah, we don't have no police. We don't have no president. We don't have a board of directors. We don't have a CFO. We don't have any of that. Who would want to put on their resume that they were the head sickie of Alcoholics Anonymous? It don't go too far. Anybody want to be the king of AA or the queen or whatever? There's a lot of drama queens and kings in AA, but that's not what we're talking about. Because you know what? We'll go ahead and jump to it. The reason that we don't have laws, punishments, rules, all that, is because we're dealing with something more powerful than that. It's this thing right here, a dictatorship. You know who the dictator is? You know who's got all that power in that? King Alcohol. Waiting for us all, right out the door, right in the bathroom, right outside. Dictatorship. He's going to have his way. It's real simple. He says, if you drink, I'm going to kill you. You don't want to go to that kingdom. We all been there. That's why we're here today. So that's a dictatorship that they're talking about. Now, you've got another power, more powerful than that. We just talked about it. That one is God. And he's saying, I've been waiting for you to do my will. When you do, you will be free. What more power do you need? One, death, one, freedom and happiness in heaven. That's why you don't need no rules. You don't need no police. You don't need all that. You got those two. That's it. Those are the two benign powers in Alcoholics Anonymous. Plus, Bill knew if you tried to rough collar alcoholic, you tell them not to do something, boy, they're going to go ahead and do it. You complain about disunity, they're going to be more disunified than ever before. You tell them, no, don't do this, don't say that, don't. You just open up the floodgates and they're going to have at it. Don't tell me what to do. I'll show you. I'll kill me and you. That's how the alcoholic mind works. So he knew that the dictatorship. When we talk about this, anarchy, a lot of people think that's a dirty word. Actually, that's a beautiful word, and it's a truism. And anarchy is a society where you can do whatever you want, whenever you want, irregardless of everybody else. So I do what I do when I want to do, and the hell with you, and you do all whatever. But guess what? After a while, we find out if we keep doing that, you keep doing that, there ain't going to be nothing left for me, and there's going to be nothing left for you. And eventually, we are forced to think of somebody besides ourselves. Oh, kind of like when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous, that me changes to we, that I comes us, and the transformation. So Alcoholics Anonymous is an anarchy too. You don't have to do a damn thing in Alcoholics Anonymous. Just I hope you live long enough after you drink to come back, and then you have to do, and you do the must, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, we find out what it really is democracy. And I'll go ahead and say it, not waving flag, not outside issue in this beautiful country that we have. That's why God, I believe, saw fit that Alcoholics Anonymous start in this country with the liberties that we have, and it's free, freedom, and free at last. Now, personal observation too. That democracy or this freedom that we have, we don't know what we got until it's gone. And then guess what? It's too late. You might not be getting it back. That's how important these traditions are. So, with that being said, we are going to talk about this novel concept in Alcoholics Anonymous. Cheryl brought some of these, but please, if you take one, they are 30 cents, and we need to recover our costs if at all possible. We didn't bring enough for everybody. And I'm sure, since we all are members of Alcoholics Anonymous, we all have this pamphlet. In case we don't, it's called the AA Group, Where It All Begins. General Service Conference approved. Fascinating as it may be, guess what? Copyright, 1965. My God, Kennedy just got killed in 63. There's a lot of people in here who weren't even born when this first came out. Nothing new. And it was reaffirmed in 1990. And again in 2005. And it was revised in 1990. So what does this mean? Well, I better know what it is, because guess what we're talking about tonight? An AA group versus a group of AAs. That's why this is on the board. I need to know what we're talking about. It's just like in Alcoholics Anonymous, the textbook, I can't talk about something that I don't know what we're talking about because I'll miss it. So it's absolutely fascinating. It says the AA group, where it all begins, how a group functions, how to get started. Obviously, we could spend a lot of time in this. We don't have time, and we'll just kind of go the highlights or lowlights, if you will. Number one, contents. AF, absolutely fascinating. I mean, with contents anymore. Because it tells me what this is. Number one, how to use this pamphlet. And that's not, we laugh about it, it's not for a coaster on your table at home. No, that's not how we use this pamphlet. I suppose you could. Number two, must be important about this. AA signals a purpose. By the way, especially in Tradition 5, stick with us. It talks about the importance of anonymity. Stay with us on that. By the way, when we're talking about that, there's two types of anonymity. We're talking about the anonymity at the level of press, radio, and film. But more powerful than that is spiritual anonymity that he's talking about in Tradition 12. And I'm going to key you off on what that is what he talks about. The purpose of this is to retain the grace of God. In other words, your sobriety ain't yours. Alcoholics Anonymous isn't yours. It's God's deal. I got to give the credit where the credit's due. Worship the Creator, not the creation. Look for the giver, not the gifts. And obviously the blesser and not the blessings. Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 concepts, 12 traditions, 12 steps, those are all of the above. But I got to remember where they came from. God. This is God's deal. I am the lucky recipient. Yes, I must do the things that I must do, but that's where it comes from. So anyhow, number 2, introduction. Wait till you see that. Then it's broken down in about a half dozen areas. The group, where the AA service structure brings, and we're going to read this real quick. What is an AA group? Is there a difference between a meeting and a group? Uh-oh. Getting on some sensitive area there. The difference between an open and a closed meeting. Next subject, how an AA group functions. Next one is the AA's group relations. Remember? Talked about that last week. Relations with others in the community. This whole section is principles before personality. Next one is how the AA group relates to AA as a whole. Oh, another relations thing. I get it for what he was talking about last week. I get it now. It's like the textbook. It's building. That's why I need to be here with every tradition, because if I miss one, then I'm going to miss something what we're talking about. It's imperative. What does AA not do? And then the last one is more questions and answers about AA. I find this a very, very, very helpful pamphlet indeed. Now, if we can, real quick, what we talked about as far as the introduction. That would be page number 10 if you're with me on that, or you want to get it, if you want to write your notes and get your pamphlet. As it says in Concept 1. Wait a minute. What is Concept over here? Wait till you see this. It'll blow your head off. It says, the final responsibility and the ultimate authority for AA World Services should always reside in the collective conscience of our whole fellowship. What is that? That's tradition 2, but it's Concept 1. Now you see that the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and the 12 concepts, they're all on the same thread. And put together, it's unbreakable. I'm in the tire business. That's what you would call a ply. 1 ply, 2 ply, 3 plies. Rocket science, it's not. The more plies, the stronger it is. I'm here to tell you these 3 plies, what we have, is an unbreakable chain between here and Almighty God. So when we talk about the steps, we talk about the traditions, now we're in the concepts, that's exactly what it is. That's how important the second tradition is. I'm going to go ahead and read it again. Because of our second tradition, we can have our first concept that says, the final responsibility and the ultimate authority for AA's world services should always reside in the collective consciousness of our whole fellowship. I found that pretty powerful. The group, and this would be page number 12, where the group in the service structure begins, because we're talking about AA group. This is what the second tradition is. Second paragraph. Now, the first one talks about what an AA group is. Stick with us, or please come back next week when we're talking about membership, because to be in an AA group, I must be a member of AA. We're going to find out who and what and can be a member of AA. That's next week. But it goes on to say, second paragraph, further clarification of an AA group may be found in the 12 concepts for the world service, concept 12, warranty 6. That'll be a different story for a different day. If you really want to have a small meeting, do that concepts. And if anybody is insomnia and can't sleep, get that service manual. I guarantee it'll put you to sleep right every night, every damn time. I tell you what, yeah, it's tough. Okay. Next one on page number 12 is there a difference between a meeting and an AA group? There is. Now I'll let you guys read it. We don't have time. It's already quarter till. Now, the next one, I am going to read this because this is so very important. It says the difference between open and closed AA meetings. Conference approved times 4. Okay, we read the dates. And it says, the purpose of all AA group meetings, as the preamble states, is for AA members, we'll find that out next week, to share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve a common problem to help others recover from alcoholism. Towards this end, AA groups have both open and closed meetings. By the way, an AA group and a group of AAs are two totally different things. We're going to go ahead and get it out now. We know what an AA group is, or we will when we're done. And a group of AAs, you can do any damn thing that you want. Anything. You can help any charitable cause. You can help any other addiction. You can do whatever you want as a group of AAs. But don't you dare call it an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And don't you dare have it registered in the intergroup office. And don't you dare have that registered in New York. Because you're not an AA group. You're a group of AAs that have spun off. And I'm not saying all those causes aren't worthwhile. Not at all. That's not what I'm saying. But that's not an AA group. Therefore, it cannot have an AA meeting. And I'm going to kill somebody if I call that an AA group. And I have an AA meeting and they come in and we're talking about everything but alcohol and alcoholism. I'll give you a personal sad experience about that. Granddaughter number, she would have been number 3. Second to last child that was born down at Akron Hospital. You guys know Allison, our baby. She comes in for the Nuts Big Book thing. She had Karina. It was a tough thing. We all had to stay out in the waiting area, and obviously ended up being cesarean, and they won't let you back. Anyhow, as time passes, we were out in the waiting room talking to my son-in-law's dad. He says, hey, everybody knows my deal about AA. It's no secret, at that level. He says, hey, you still doing that AA thing? I said, yeah. He says, how long you got? I forget what it was at that time. Let's see, it would have been about 27 years at that time. And he goes, did you know that I tried AA? I almost fell on my chair. I knew that he needed it, but I didn't, say, yeah. Takes one to know one, yeah. I said, no, Bob, I didn't know that. He says, yeah, I tried it for about a week. He said, I'm never going back. Then he really had me with those two things. I said, why aren't you going back? He says, I went to a meeting every day for a week, and nobody talked about alcohol or alcoholism out of the mouth of a babe. I cried that day. I cried when Karina was born, and I got to hold her, my baby, one of my babies. And I cried that day because we lost this guy, and he's probably going to die from alcoholism because he ain't coming back. Because those groups were masqueraded as an AA group and masqueraded as an AA meeting, and they sent this guy out to the wall to die, and he ain't coming back that I know of, and that's what he told me. I mean, I will try to say, and I went on the defense. I said, well, Bob, I said, you got to be careful, and I can tell you, and he said, save it. He wasn't being whatever. He was just being, as a matter of fact. We were talking about the 21-game winning streak. That's what we were just talking. We were passing time. But listen what he said. Now, so we're going to kill this guy. And how many other people is he going to go? He'll say, don't go to that AA. They don't work. They don't even talk about it. Then somebody else is going to say, well, yeah, this guy said that, whatever. You tell me the difference between a group of AAs and an AA group. And I could go on, but time won't permit. So anyhow, it goes on to say, it says, closed meetings are for AA members only, or for those who have a drinking problem who have a desire to stop drinking. Open meetings are available to anyone interested in Alcoholics Anonymous program of recovery. And by the way, you notice it doesn't say about not drinking. Program of recovery from alcoholism. Non-alcoholics may attend open meetings as observers. That means you can come to any open meeting that you want as an observer, but not a participant. Not a participant in donating the basket. Not a participant in reading anything. Not a participant in speaking behind the podium, not a participant. You can come get all the help that you want. That's an open meeting, but please, it's for alcoholics, and we ask that you don't participate. That's what an AA group is and isn't. Delivering the mail, not hitting anybody with the mailbox. And the mail is, you're the AA group. You've got mail. Okay, so it goes on to say, at both types of meetings, the AA chairperson may request the participants to confine their discussion to matters pertaining to recovery from alcoholism, whether open or closed. AA group meetings are conducted by AA members who determine the format of their meetings. Man, that might be too simple for me to understand, but anyhow, that's what it is. So, now that I know what a AA group is and isn't, now that I know the difference between a group of AAs, now I can see what he's going to say about our second tradition, because remember what the second tradition reads. So let's go on if we can. My bad. If you weren't here, and we hand this out every week, and it will be an ongoing thing. This is a syllabus. This was last week's readings, and it is this week's readings as well. And obviously, what we're talking about there is tradition 2. And we start on page 77 and 78. And as we stated last week too, unbelievable the date on this. He wrote this article January of 1948. I could have sworn he wrote it January 2017, and the ink is just dry. And listen to how he starts with the traditions. This is page 77 where it says Tradition 2. It says, sooner or later, every AA, not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few. There he goes already. Got to be ready. Every AA comes to depend. Wait a minute. Believing, having faith, but depending? And that's right. In that other book, he talks about reliance too. Depends on a power, capital P. He's done the same thing here that he did in the big book. Whenever he talks about God and doesn't use the word God, he will capitalize that. So that's God, by the way, y'all. Okay? Power greater than himself. He finds that the God of his understanding is not only a source of strength, but also a source of positive direction. Squiggly writings italicized. So, if anybody asks you what God is, I'm going to tell you, according to language of the heart. Source of strength, source of positive direction, and we find out it's going to even be more. Realizing that some fraction of infinite resource. My God, how much better can it be? Source of strength, source of positive direction, infinite resource. I better get that Godfeller in my pocket, huh? Okay? And it says, is now available. What happens when we have that? His life takes on an entirely. Not a little bit. Oh, that's right. Silkworth says in the doctor's opinion, we're recreating our lives. He tells us in the narrative of the third step, we are reborn. Guess what? Entirely. Entirely different complexion. And that doesn't mean you're zit-free anymore, by the way. That would be nice, okay? He experiences a new inner security together with such a sense of destiny and purpose as he's ever known before. I would say that would be Spiritual Awakening, Spiritual Experience, Appendix 2 in the book. That's pretty powerful. Now look what he's done. He's taken it from the personal level that we have, but he's going to put it in the tradition. I mean, my God, who wouldn't be attracted to this, what he just got done talking about? We're reborn. We're dead, and now we're alive with all these promises. He goes on to say, as each day passes, not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few. Each day passes, our AA reviews his mistakes and vicissitudes. What is a vicissitude? By the way, y'all, he uses that on page 56 in the big book, and I'll paraphrase for you what that means. And if you weren't here last week, please, we need a Webster's to do this book, as all things that Bill writes. That's the ups and downs of life. That's a vicissitude, or the changing fortunes of one's life. In other words, it's a life thing. Elevator game. You have your ups and your downs, and some days you get the shaft, and that's all there is to it. So, and it says, he learns from daily experience what his remaining defects are and becomes willing to have them removed. Sounds like obviously we're doing step 4, and obviously we're doing 10 and 11 on a daily basis, and we're doing 6 and 7. Look how he's baiting us in with the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, this tradition. Absolutely beautiful. And if we do that, we have all those things that he talked about. Okay, and it says, in this fashion, what fashion? The steps. He improves his conscious contact with God. So now he set the ground rules that what we do in our life and what it's done for us, now we take it to the group. And it says, every AA group, not some, not most, not a lot, quite a few, follows the same cycle of development. The 12 steps, right? But it's at the group level, okay? We are coming to realize that each group, now we know what that is, as well as each individual, is a special entity, not quite like another. You can say that again. It says, though AA groups are basically the same, each group does have its own special atmosphere, its own particular state of development. I'm going to go ahead and say it, and please don't take it this way, but I can sense what a group is like when I walk in the door before a word's even spoken. I can sense it in the parking lot. It happened to me last night. I walked in, I was in Youngstown, went there, and before I even said a word to anybody, before I got in outside, I knew where I was at. And I was damn right when I was there. It was alive, it was well, it was healthy, and it was the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. In other words, it was this. It was an AA group. My God, was it refreshing. It was quite refreshing. So, anyhow, it says, the special atmosphere is its own state of development. We believe that every AA group, not some, not most, not quite a few, has a conscience. It's a collective conscience of its own membership. Daily experience informs and instructs this conscience. Oh, I'm going to read that again. Daily experience informs and instructs his conscience. So it's not what I want. It's not what I think. It's not what I feel. Oh, I get it. So that I, me, and my has absolutely nothing to do with a group conscience. If you hear the word I, me, or my at a discussion at a home group meeting, that has nothing to do with our experience at all. It's our experience. It's not what I think. It's not what I want. It's what our experiences is. And it's already been here. That's what we're doing. And it goes on to say, obviously, informs and instructs. Okay. The group begins to recognize its own defects of character, and one by one, these are removed or lessened. As this process, what is that? We're talking about the inventory, continues. Oh, wait a minute. I can't continue something unless I've already done it or I'm doing it. I see. That's why it says in step 10, continue to take personal inventory. But I can't continue something if I've never done it. I'm talking about the 5-column process as it is in Alcoholics Anonymous, the book. I can't continue something that I haven't done, and it's the same thing with the group. I can't be informed and instructed if I'm not doing the deal. Tradition 2. What he's trying to say is a lot of groups have a group conscience, but it's not informed. If it's not informed, then Is that God's will? Or is that a bunch of self-will run riot that are saying, I, me, my, whatever? Raise your hand, and, the group and the majority goes, and away you go. I don't know. Here's what it says here. Okay, and then it says, as this process continues, the group becomes better and able to receive right direction for its own affairs. Trial and error produces group experience. Out of its corrected experience comes custom. When a customary way of doing things is definitely proved to be the best, then that custom forms into a tradition. The greater power, capital G and P, God, is then working through a clear group conscience. See how he takes an idea and gets the different levels and layers. We're talking about a group, we're talking about a conscience, and now we're talking about a clear group conscience or God. Absolutely. Let's hear it. Amen. Fascinating. All right, go on. Now, here's how it says. We humbly hope, well, not just hope and believe, we humbly hope and believe that our growing age tradition will be to prove the will of God for us. We talked about that. Skip the next sentence. Here's what we talk about. We in AA have no coercive human authority. Okay. No handcuffs, no citations, no nothing, huh? Because each AA of necessity has a sensitive and responsive conscience, and because alcohol will discipline him severely if he backslides. Oh, we already talked about that. We're finding we have little need for man-made rules and regulations. Despite the fact that we do veer off at times on tangents, we are becoming more able to depend absolutely on the long-term stability of the AA group itself. With respect to its own affairs, the collective conscience, all right, now we're talking about collective, we're talking about group, we're talking about clear, just like unity. Come on, y'all. It's talking about different things of the conscience, what the group conscience is and isn't. Okay? And it says, obviously, the collective conscience of the group will, given time, almost surely demonstrate its perfect dependability. The group conscience will, in the end, prove far more infallible guide for group affairs than a decision of any individual member, however good or wise he may be. Dr. Bob and Bill knew that. They knew the group conscience was always, always better than one or two, including them. Okay, that's obviously how we got that. So he goes on to say, this is a striking and almost unbelievable fact about Alcoholics Anonymous. Hence, we can safely dispense those exhortations and punishments seemingly so necessary to other societies. We need not depend overmuch on inspired leaders because our active leadership of service can be truly rotating. We can enjoy a kind of democracy rarely available elsewhere. Next paragraph. Therefore, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are certain there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in the group conscience. Do you know how many times he talked about the group in that tradition? I'm glad somebody's ADD and glad you asked. That's lucky number 13. 13 he talked about that. So I think I better know what a group is, and I better know what the conscience is, and I better gather here so I can really get a handle on this second tradition. Okay, page 93. It's a quickie. About the second paragraph down, or the second paragraph where it says Tradition 2. Page 93. Tradition 2. It says, Tradition 2 asks us to listen to God as he may speak in the group conscience. Pretty simple. But you got to listen. Oh, that means I got to take the cotton out of my ears and put it in my mouth. I got it. Okay. Page 165. See what he says about the second tradition. It would be the first paragraph where it says, then and there. Page 165. It talks about then and there. Then and there, they proved as never before that AA's tradition 2 was correct. The group conscience could safely act as the sole authority and sure guide for Alcoholics Anonymous. Skip the next sentence in the other one. It says, we knew the impossible had happened, that AA could never break down in the middle, that Alcoholics Anonymous was at last safe from any storm the future might bring, providing it's an informed group conscience, a loving God. See, there's qualifications to everything. Okay, 326. Second paragraph. For this action, there are excellent and even compelling reasons. The basic one is present need to strictly apply to tradition 2 to every area of our world service operation. Damn him, not some, not most, not a lot, not quite a few, everyone. Okay? And it goes on to say, obviously, this means I should no longer act as a service leadership for the group conscience of AA. This must, not should, could, ought to, now become fully the function of our trustees as guided by the conference delegates. Consider, too, AA's very healthy tradition of rotating leadership. Everywhere today, this is strictly applied principle. Okay. 339. Second paragraph. 339, second paragraph, where it starts with the word certainly. Certainly, our long isolated board members were trusted servants, but it was nonetheless true that these trustees had no direct connection to the group conscience of our society, nor were they directly accountable to it. It was therefore becoming evident that we here in New York were still operating as a protectorate, something that had by then become obsolete and quite inconsistent with the provision in the spirit of AA's second tradition. Got it. Second and last paragraph where it starts with he. It says, he also continued, and he's talking about Burn Smith, and if you get a chance, read the whole article on there, to remind us that self-direction was the very first responsibility of every democratic society such as ours had said it was in tradition too. Second and last paragraph. Certainly his story has a deep and clear relevance to this all-important matter of AA's future leadership. That's what we're talking about in tradition too. And by the way, leaders and leadership is not a dirty word. In fact, it's a good word. There are going to be leaders and leaderships in Alcoholics Anonymous. That is not what some people think. Now we're talking about authority. Let's go to page 40. Remember the loving God, the ultimate authority that he talked about? Let's see what he talks about. I like this. January 47. Will AA ever have personal government? The answer to this question is almost surely no. That is a clear verdict of our experience. Next sentence says, each AA has been an individual who, because of his alcoholism, could seldom govern himself. Really? Oh, that's right, my life's unmanageable. That's right, okay. Nor could any other human being govern the alcoholic's obsession to drink, his drive to have things his way. Skip the next sentence. Almost without exception, the failure to accomplish anything by coercion has been complete. Yet we alcoholics can be led. Not coerced, we can be led, okay? We can be inspired. Can't be coerced, but we can be led, we can be inspired. Okay? Coming into A we can, and we gladly do yield to the will of God. Not the will of me, not the will of you, the will of God. So if we're having a hard time, then we may not be having an informed group conscience with a loving God as he's expressing it, okay? And it goes on to say, hence it is not strange that the only real authority to be found in AA is that of that spiritual principle. It is never personal authority. Oh, that's right, we talked about that. Anarchy, dictatorship, democracy. Never. Strong words, okay? And I don't understand why people won't think the way I want them to think. Okay, now it goes on to say, our unreasonable individualism, egocentricity, if you like, or ego, was of course the main reason we all failed in life. Well, wait a minute. If I'm failing in life something today, then that means, oh, okay, I got it, okay? I got it, okay? And it says, we all failed in life and betook others to alcohol. When we couldn't coerce others into conformity with our own plans and desires, we drank. When others tried to coerce us, we also drank. I like that too. We drank and we drank and we drank. Though now sober, we still have a strong hangover of these early traits which cause us to resist authority. Therein probably hangs a clue to our lack of personal government in AA. Skip the next sentence to where it says, no one set in personal authority over anyone else. I'm going to go ahead and say that again. No one set in personal authority over anyone else. Though no sterling virtue, our aversion to obedience does pretty well guarantee us freedom from personal domination of any kind. Still, it is a fact that most, not all, but most of us do follow in our personal lives the 12 suggested steps to recovery. He didn't say for recovery, to. Oh, that's that path to. 4 and 2, if you're not sure, better get her out. Okay? To recovery. But we do this from choice. We prefer recovery to death. Oh, okay. Look what he's talking about here, y'all. Now he's talking about life and death for the individual. He's talking about life and death for Alcoholics Anonymous with these traditions. Remember how he sets the stage? He always sets the stage with the steps in personal life and then what it means to the group in Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. You got to be aware of his style, and it's just like I said, it blows my mind. He's getting ready to get there. That's what it says. And it says, then little by little, we perceive that, that the spiritual basis of life is the best. We conform because we want to. Yeah. Because when you have the hats and you have tos and the must, when you want to and you're willing to, you're free. Because guess what? It's no longer work. It's no longer a chore. It's no longer a pain in the ass. It's no longer a, you know what? It's because it's the right thing to do. It's the will of God. And then also you're receiving all the things. Who doesn't want more? Yeah, give me more. So it goes on to say, likewise, most AA groups become willing to follow 12 points of tradition to assure our future. Okay. Page 41. It starts there. It says, the AA group follows these other traditional principles for the very same reason that the individual follows the 12 steps to recovery. There he goes again. Damn him. Okay. All right. Groups see that they would disintegrate. Somebody was saying, what was happening? Why don't we talk about what happens when we don't do these traditions? I said, we're going to talk about that tonight. That's what a fancy word, disintegrate. You know what that is? That's on Star Wars, dude. You get zapped and there's nothing left. Disintegrate. That's what happens when we don't have it. That's modern tradition too. 2017, okay? Disintegrate. If they didn't, and they soon discover that adherence to our tradition and experience is the foundation for a happier and more effective group life. So if you got a miserable group, if you got a bunch of dry bags in there, all the fighting and the yelling and the crying and the tears and the dramas and the I's and the me's and the my's, I suppose maybe we have to have a foundation of tradition and experience for a happier and more effective group life. Nowhere in AA is there to be any constituted human authority that can compel an AA group to do anything. Some AA groups, for example, elect their leaders. And it says, each leader soon discovers that while he can always guide by example or persuasion, he can never boss. And if you see a group that is not following these principles, chances are, not only is it going to be what they were talking about, unhealthy and miserable, chances are it ain't going to be around too long. Because what you're serving at that group, nobody wants. It's like a bad restaurant. If you keep serving the crap, pretty soon you ain't going to have nobody to serve, and the group will close. Happens all the time. That's why the 300 and whatever we got. How many we got listed? 386. Okay. That's the latest edition, but I suppose once the ink dries, it could be down, it could be up. It's like the stock market. But what I'm saying, a lot of those groups ain't going to make it. The reason that it is they aren't following these spiritual principles, and it isn't going to go. And that's, in itself, I'll try to do it, but I go back to what I just talked about, my son-in-law's dad. That's where their damage is done in killing people. The people that were in that group will wander or go somewhere or do something else, and I'm not saying about that, but I'm talking about what happens before that group closes is what is alarming. I use the politically correct word, alarming. Okay. So, it goes on to say, the majority of AA groups do not even choose their leaders. They prefer rotating committees to handle their simple affairs. These committees are invariably guarded as servants. Uh-oh, where we go. Okay. And they only have the authorization to serve, never command. Each committee carries out what it believes to be the wishes of the group. That is all. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. Though AA committees used to try to discipline wayward members, though they have sometimes composed minute rules and regulations, and now they have set themselves up as judges of other people's personal morals, I know of no case where anything seemingly worthy strivings had any lasting effect except perhaps the election of a brand new committee. Okay, well, I'll show you. Okay. Surely I can make these assertions with the greatest of confidence, for in my own turn, I too have tried the hand of governing AA. Each time I have strenuously tried, I've been shouted down so loudly, in fact, that on several occasions it looked as though I was due for a swift and certain excommunication. And Bill laughing at himself. Here he is, the co-founder, saying he was going to try to fix AA. Then he ran his ass back to New York and said, don't ever come back. I don't care who you are. Last paragraph. After struggling a few years to run the AA movement, I had to give it up. It simply didn't work. Heavy-handed assertion of my personal authority, always, not sometimes, not most of the time, not a lot of time, not quite a few times, created confusion and resistance. I get it. No personal authority. God. Page 42, huh? Second sentence. And why does the dictator think he is? If I sharply criticize, I usually get double criticism. Oh, that's karma, y'all. What you send out is what you get back. We're not talking about after you die. We're talking about right now. If you're sending out Boulder Dash, you're going to get it back. That's a spiritual axiom. What you send out is what you get back. In spades. That's a spiritual axiom, too. That means you get more than you're dishing out. That's why it says, judge not, be not judged. And that old book has all those spiritual axioms because they're true. Okay, it says personal power always failed. Not sometimes, not a lot, not quite a few. Last sentence in that first paragraph. Each of us learns that in AA, one can be a servant only. Got it. Next paragraph, where it starts in there, where it says, serving purely as such, they cannot rule or propagandize. Talking about serve, serve, serve. Not rule, rule, rule. Not dictate, don't police, don't do this, don't do that. Serve, serve, serve. Third to last paragraph. It says, it's most clearly apparent that even here, the very center of AA, there only exists a center of service. Custodians, editors, secretaries, and the like, each to be sure with a special vital